The Legacy Experience has been brought to you in part by Sage, Cortland, Islander Precision Fly Reels, Suffix, the world's most hardcore fishing line.
Behind me is the Great Bear Rainforest. We're in the Darby Channel, and we're going out saltwater fly fishing the Pacific today, trying to catch silver chromebrite salmon on the fly. On today's show, we learned so much about searching for salmon. We start with speed bucktailing, find out that those fish aren't there. A little later in the show, we find new techniques and new ways of catching silver bright salmon on the fly. Stay tuned for a very exciting edition of the Legacy Experience. Honker. Oh, nice fish. Oh, yeah. Big fat pig. Oh, hey, if you haven't tried bucktailing, Rivers Inlet, we're up at the Great Bear Rainforest. This is Fitzhugh Sound, Calvert Island. I'm going to show you techniques for putting big northern coho numbers, making that a reality. These fish are absolutely tanks. And you've got to be going in the right direction of the kelp. That's the absolute key thing. Big, big northerns. There we go. All these big fish we target are coming from the kelp, whether it's July or August. Look at the size of this guy. What a gem. One of the most exciting fly fisheries that we have in British Columbia. Oh my, this is just a big, I'm gonna back the drag off a little. How we doing? That's good. All right. Wow, this is a nice fish. Look at that. Big northern silvers. Unbelievable. Aren't they healthy? And you can see the big kite noses on these fish. Gorgeous fish. Now the whole trick to successful bucktailing when you're fishing for big wild fish is, number one, make sure your bucktails are big. Make sure you put the Indiana blade on. We'll cover that a little bit later. And make sure you stay tight to the kelp, pre-checking the area to make sure that you've got clear flow and no rocks in the way. We're looking at depths anywhere from 17 feet in near the kelp out to about 20, but no more than about 20 feet from that kelp. And when you hit a leading point, try to have that bucktail swinging right in it, because these big coho and chinook are literally just sitting there waiting up to get your fly. And we're traveling 3.8 to 4.2 miles per hour. Now we're just coming around a leading point. You can see the big, got the full Cortland 325 grain out. I want that bucktail, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, I want it to swing around just on a nice outside arc on the outside of this kelp here. Kelps, leading points, 100%. You want to be checking your bucktails as often as you can, comfortably. In between your, what I call money spots, check that fly, make sure you don't have a piece of kelp or anything on it, because even one little piece, it won't get bit. Oh. Holy, this is a monster. It's gonna turn out and try to get this fish in control. Oh man, good fish. Oh, he's going every possible direction. And you can get a real flurry going because we've had at least 4 fish on it. Really hard to keep those barbless hooks in them. I think this might be another example. Thank goodness those shooting heads, they really help put a little bit of weight. Big fat fish coming right at you. Oh my goodness. Woo. Look at the size of this tank. Ho, 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 ho. Right out of the kelp. Oh, exciting. Just gonna get this out to open ocean a little bit, just so we can handle this fish. This is another really good one too. There we go. This reel that we're using here today, these are pretty legendary reels. These are Islander LX 3.8s, Cortland 325 grain, plenty of backing. I could highly recommend going to the LX 4.0 to keep up on these big northerns, because you have got a reel like a son of a gun. Oh yeah. Look at the size of you. Man, oh man. What a tank. This is where I back off the drag a touch. You can see where that tandem hook, but this one is hooked solid. I get a little splashed. Big coho like that, absolutely spectacular. Look at you, wow. Here's a few of my favorite patterns that I like to use. These are made by Unique Fly Fishing Products. These are ones over the last 15 years that have really stood out as just brilliantly tied with just all the right components. You can see the black back of a herring over white. And the key is the length of the hair. You want to have a good, thick, well-designed with the mylar tubing to get maximum flash. You see we've got tandem hooks on there. The hard Devcon epoxy, super hard mylar stick-on eyes. But these are really well tied polar bear bucktails by Unique Fly Fishing Products. Before we even get into the Indiana blades, to talk about bucktailing with the new technologies and tying and thinking, you'd have to also talk about skull heads. Now the skull heads, the weighting factor with the brass lead heads, the mylar stick-on eyes, painted eyes, you notice the same color combos, black over white, extremely successful with a red throat. That is exactly where bucktailing is today. The next component we have to add to give the max flash is to add the Indiana blades. We add 4 beads, and this is put on 25-pound Suffix Invisalign fluorocarbon. It helps that clevis spin on the fluorocarbon a little bit longer than it will with mono. You do have to change your leaders every couple of days because it will wear fluorocarbon and mono. Just make sure on the clevis, that's what allows the Indiana blade to spin, that you buy the high quality ones and they'll last you day in and day out. These are Cortland Precision Subsurface 24-foot tips, 325 grain. That lets the fly just get down a little bit deeper when you're going that fast. And all we do is add the 6-foot leader, and we loop to loop it. All fly lines now, or the majority of them, come with double loop to loop connections. So a 6-foot leader right to your bucktail. There's a few tips for what we're using to get big fish bucktailing in the Great Bear Rainforest.
Well, as they say, all good things must come to an end. When the big northerns moved out of the kelp and inshore zones completely, after being there day in and day out, which left only one problem: where to find them now, and I had no idea where they'd gone. I had plenty of time to think about it over the next few hours of searching new waters, looking for bait and feeding salmon arcs on the electronics, trying to troubleshoot and put a new plan together, which seemed to be going nowhere fast, until after watching a few boats trolling herring, getting into a few fish in the 60 to 100 foot zones, I decided to hit the leading point transition drop-off zones and get the heavy skullhead fly patterns down at that depth by stack mending the fly line and letting the fly line get down to the 80 to 120 foot zone on the upcoming slack tide. If I can give any advice on saltwater fly fishing for salmon, it's to never get stuck in one pattern, as the minute you think you have it all figured out, the fish always change the rules, and you'll need to adapt to find new fish and new fly waters.
This is just a monster. These are the minutes, moments that you wish you put an extra sharpness on that hook. That was in 100 feet of water. Now I can only fish 100 feet of water simply because we're on a high slack. I never would get that line down that type of distance. Oh, no, that was a painstaking. We spent 4 hours bucktailing all of our key points. Do you think those fish would come up? Look at him, there he is. Look at the size of that fish. That's it, that's it. Take that line, now you know you're hooked. Right to the kelp. Thank you, Cortland 325 grain. They're not in shallow. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't forget to try the transition water, the drop-offs, as they're called. It's just a monster coho. That's what it is. Good looking fish. Out of 100 feet of water. Tie your fly line straight down. I think that's one of the things about saltwater fly fishing. You know, when you're fishing bait, you know, there's just a great opportunity at the schools, at more fish. When you're fishing the fly, it's kind of an isolated bait out there, and sometimes it's that needle in a haystack. But if you have the confidence in, you know, what those techniques are, if they're not on the surface, if they're not tight in inshore kelp, if they're not taking bucktails, fish the drop-offs, because I've really learned today that those fish are still there. All right, there we go. Saltwater fly fishing the Pacific, absolutely stunning. Good looking big coho like that. Hey, when those fish have moved off the shallow waters and that inshore pocket kelp that we've covered in other shows, and you just can't bring them to the top, make sure to fish those skull heads or super weighted fly patterns. You don't have to fly cast, just simply let that line out, your full fly line, and start just a micro slow retrieve right off and up from the drop off edge lip fish that whole water. It's absolutely integral when it comes to producing really nice coho like that. So we've just about got our 90-foot fly line retrieved. You can see we've got the 24-foot head there. I'm going to show you exactly what we're doing to fish these transition zones. You can see on the flies here, we're fishing a pretty smashed bait fish pattern, but it's a tandem, and it's the skull heads, and I'll show you that's a 9-foot leader down to a 15-pound tippet. 15 or 20 will be fine. They're not leader shy. So in this, instead of casting, all you're doing is taking the line, being very careful with the amount of line that you've got down there near your feet, and you can see it just kind of like stack mending. You can see how quick this line goes down. That's an entire fly line on the water. Just put your last little bit of fly line out there. You can see that's your whole fly line, and we're just getting to the end of it. But you can see the zone we're talking about and why they weren't coming up for the bucktails anymore. For the retrieve, just nice and easy. Those fish down there at 80, 90 feet, they're just expecting a school of herring to be chomping on, and you're just one of the fly patterns that happens to be in the mix. Most of the learning in saltwater fly fishing has happened over the last 20 to 25 years. And there's so much history to dig into in what's happened in the past, what's happening now, and what'll happen in the future. The most important thing is that regardless of whether you're a sport fisherman, whether you're commercial net fisherman, that we all realize that this resource is not infinite. There are only so many of these fish, and they do have to be protected. The ability to move from inshore to offshore, paying careful attention to what, if there's bait boats around, see where they're spinning herring. Ask them if they're catching fish. And if they're still catching fish, you know there's a hope that you're gonna get one on the fly. Oh my goodness, that's a biggie. Oh, hello. Clearing the line, he's taking it all. 100 feet of line. Oh yeah, to the real fish. Whoa, come on back. Because you care about something as amazing as salmon that swim in the Pacific. It is the key of the entire marine environment. And it's all of our jobs to make sure that we don't take the last fish. That we set realistic salmonid limits. Oh yeah. So that our children can one day come and do this. Drop-off zone salmon on the fly. And that's the beauty of waters like Fitzhugh Sound and Calvert Island, how it's protected. Got the big massive Pacific out this way, Japan another 3,000 miles that way. But these inshore waters here allow that fly line, regardless of the tide push left or right, that allows that fly line to get down. All right. I want to show you the pattern that I like for transition zone fishing the best. The brass head skull head with a mylar stick-on eyes, the red throat, nice sharp tandem hook at the back. And the knot that we're using on that is simply a non-slip loop knot or a Duncan loop. Take it to the end of your 9-foot tapered leader. Put a loop in. These flies really are revolutionary when you think about it. The ability to target fish that deep in waters like this, Fitzhugh Sound. Just go up through the loop and pinch it there. You see that tag end? That just goes back into this loop. See it right there? Grab it and pull, and that is where the loop stays fixed. Non-slip loop knot. As far as what we've learned today, I've learned a ton. Sometimes those fish aren't inshore. As many hours as I put in after we'd caught those first fish, we couldn't buy a fish. Going out to the transition or the drop-off, you can see how far we are from shore, but the fish were no longer inshore. Started fishing offshore, sinking these beautiful skullhead fly patterns on 8-weight gear. This is a Cortland 325 grain. That's with an Islander LX 3.8 that really is an unbelievable reel for fly fishing. The two I use is the LX 3.8 and the 4.0, smashing reels for just about any situation. The rod that we're using, it's a 4-piece, 9-foot. It's an XI3 Sage model. It's built for salt water, H2O technology as they call it. But that's how quickly you change over from those gorgeous bucktails that we were fishing earlier today. Got to switch over, take off the Indiana blades, get down, fish deep to get those big salmon. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week on another edition of the Legacy Experience.
The Legacy Experience has been brought to you in part by Sage, Cortland, Islander Precision Fly Reels, Suffix, the world's most hardcore fishing line.